interesting thing here is a long time ago, men and women weren't allowed to expose their chests. I saw a photograph from Atlantic City from the 1920s. In the middle of summer, everyone's wearing suits. It was a very, I look at it from our perspective today, and I'm like, it's very weird. And then you can see a couple decades later, all of a sudden women are wearing like unitard bathing suits, one-piece bathing suits. Men start wearing swim trunks. All of a sudden men aren't wearing shirts. No one seemed to care that men's nipples, right? Just culturally shifted this way. We are starting to see this in many states across the country where in New York, for instance, many of these states, it is considered, I believe, a violation of the 1964 Civil Rights Act to tell women they can't expose their nipples if men can, which instead of creating a circumstance where men must now cover up, it created the inverse circumstance where women now don't have to. But here's where it gets interesting, because I think this is a very, very interesting point. I have a picture here, Libby Emmons posted, of Dylan Mulvaney.
Okay.
Libby asks, why is the New York Post blurring male nipples in a sheer dress? Dylan Mulvaney, of course, publicly identifies as trans, wearing a sheer dress where you can visibly see Dylan's nipples. There's an interesting question being asked. If Dylan Mulvaney is biologically male, and the argument is legally, or not legally, but in all social media, nobody cares if a male is showing their breasts, what about Dylan Mulvaney makes it now that these nipples are no longer allowed to be seen on the internet?
You know, Tim, it's so interesting. I saw this on social media this morning before I came over here. And Dylan Mulvaney has endured a huge influx of criticism, hate, and, you know, even people are saying, why did she have to leave the nation? I understand that. I took that in a smaller context in Los Angeles in June earlier this summer. The thing is, what I immediately thought when I saw this image and when I saw the criticisms. So you want to say that Dylan Mulvaney is a man, and then you're upset that Dylan Mulvaney is showing her nipples. So which is it? Is Dylan Mulvaney a man, or is Dylan Mulvaney a woman who shouldn't expose her nipples? I feel like many of the critics, you can't have it both ways. You can't. So if you acknowledge that, well, we shouldn't see her nipples, okay, so you acknowledge her as a woman. But if you see Dylan Mulvaney as a man, which is untrue, which is not how Dylan sees herself, then what's the issue? You can't have it both ways.
Right. I mean, I personally don't see why they're blurred out. Dylan Mulvaney, in my opinion, Dylan Mulvaney.
But you just said that children should not be exposed to women's nipples. So although Dylan Mulvaney is not performing in a drag show right here, she's on social media that's being broadcast much more broadly over Twitter, Instagram, etc., than performing at a drag brunch, which I don't even think that Dylan identifies as a drag queen. Dylan is a trans person. So what is it? Is it offensive that she is trans? Is it offensive that her nipples are showing? And if her nipples are showing, but you think that she's a man, then what's the issue?
Well, I think it's offensive that they're blurred out and they're referring to...
I agree.
And they're referring to him as a her, because I think that Dylan Mulvaney is an actor. That's what I think. I think he exists for publicity stunts. And a lot of people, including myself, while we might use the pronoun she, we do it out of politeness, not...
No, I disagree. I'm sorry to cut you off, but I will tell you, this is not about how everybody else perceives. We should be addressing people the way that they see themselves. And that is truly a big part of the trans issue. Is a lot of the reason that trans people portray themselves in a certain way is because they want the world to see themselves the way that they see themselves. Mm-hmm. And so Dylan sees herself as a woman. She is a trans woman. Mm-hmm. So to then call her out and say, well, no, you're a man and you still can't show your nipples, there is a huge hypocrisy in that.
Oh, I agree. I don't think they should be blurred.
Yeah, it is weird. Also with the White House, when you had, I believe it was two trans men and a trans woman, you had the trans woman covering up her breasts and the trans men were not. Mm-hmm. Outrage was focused on the trans woman, though ultimately the White House did address all three of them. I bring up the same question because there's got to be a logical answer or question as to what is the issue at hand. Is the issue that as soon as a person grows breast tissue through hormones or whatever, we all of a sudden decide? There have also been, even outside of the context of transgender issues, on Instagram, for instance, women, females will take pasties of male nipples over their nipples and post pictures because there seems to be some kind of logical inconsistency here. Either we say no nipples for anybody or we say nipples for everybody. That I agree. I don't have the answer. It seems something's broken there.
No, I agree with you. And until our society stops sexualizing nipples, it'll be that way. And that's including
particularly on female nipples, right?
And that's the thing, female nipples. So is it on the individual to cover up their nipples, or is it on society to say, hey, maybe I shouldn't sexualize somebody's body just because they have a body? We all have bodies, and we all have sexuality within us. We all have sexual components of ourselves, and that's an individual decision. I'm not saying every woman has to go out there and show off her breasts if she's not comfortable. But if you are comfortable, you should be able to do that just in the way that men can do that. And it's part of the patriarchy.
So how would you define patriarchy?
I would define patriarchy as society defined by men, which we are I think we're having a really important societal conversation about this right now. But this is something that has dictated society since the beginning of history. You know, when we look at different parts of society through historical times, you see that men have sexualized women, and then women end up having to be the victim because they are being sexualized. So I don't think that in all instances women are sexualizing themselves. I think that men are often sexualizing women, and therefore women have to cover themselves because men can't control themselves.
We see this, I think, the most pronounced example would be in Middle Eastern countries. The niqab, I believe, is probably pronouncing it right, but women have to completely cover their entire bodies except for their eyes. Right. I don't know enough about the culture or religion. My understanding is that, and this could be completely wrong, is that the men argue that they can't control themselves if they see a beautiful woman, therefore the women must cover up. Not that the men should not attack the women. Something like that.
Do you think that's fair, Tim?
That women should be forced to cover up? Absolutely not.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think most Americans are probably like that.
No, then why does a drag performer who is performing in a drag brunch or a drag show that folks are consenting to attend to have to cover themselves up? And if a child happens to be present, what is that going to do to inherently groom them or sexualize them?
Well, I don't necessarily think a breast is a sexual thing or is something to be sexualized. It's what you do with the breast. Now, in numbers, this is what I don't understand why you think that they're not sexual things. Drag queens will wear big breasts. They will rub them. They'll motorboat men in the audience.
All of them.
No, but can we just say that everything I say is not an umbrella that encompasses every single person?
Yes,
within a
but
group?
the right in the argument against drag culture is based off of these few instances, these outliers, and folks are taking those instances and applying it to drag should not be allowed around children whatsoever.
No, I understand that, and I think that is the drag community's fault. And that's why I was the adult who came out and said something. Why can't, if we were going to expose children to this, why is it going to be a drag queen with their legs spread open reading to kids about, hey, maybe you're a girl, maybe you're a boy. It's like there's no PR or there's no like head of the LGBTQ Inc. that is like managing these things.
Yeah, but I also think that's a total mischaracterization of what Drag Queen Story Hour is. We see these few clips that are spread around on the internet. A lot of right-wing folks like to spread these images. Of course, there are people who cross a line, who cross a boundary. And I disagree with that. I don't think that drag performers who are engaging in Drag Queen Story Hour should be doing that kind of performance. But I also think that is a very small minority of what is actually happening. And any person, any adult who brings their child to a Drag Queen Story Hour is doing so in a consensual manner. And I don't think that they're bringing their kids to be sexualized. I mean, you have to be a total pervert to want to sexualize your own child. But that is the way that the LGBTQIA community and specifically drag performers are being portrayed portrayed because of this particular kind of language. I have done Drag Queen Story Hour a couple of times. I did it at DTLA Proud a few years ago, and I did it actually somewhat recently. The LGBT Center in Los Angeles hosted Trans Pride, and I was booked to do Drag Queen Story Hour. And you know what? I showed up and I brought very age-appropriate books. These were literal children's books about, about spirituality and about acceptance and about, loving yourself and loving others. There was nothing sexual about that. And everybody in the room, they enjoyed it. The parents enjoyed it. The children enjoyed it. There was nothing sexual about it. And yet, there are so many people who are claiming that, Drag Queen Story Hour is grooming and sexualizing children. And that is not the case. The thing is, there might be one or two or a couple of people out there that might not even realize that they are crossing a line because they're used to performing in nightclubs and night venues. But the thing is, I don't even think they're attempting to sexualize children. There might be some things that are inappropriate, but that's the thing. It's hard to pick out a specific guideline that is going to apply to every single age group and every single person. And it's up to the parents to decide, do I want to bring my child to Drag Queen Story Hour?
But that's actually the grooming argument, that certainly many of the Drag Queen Story Hours are just someone in drag reading stories. But as you mentioned, some people are crossing the line. And then you have the more egregious example.